with foreign countries, and intra-regional relationship in a new dimension, as you say. And I have three questions. And then first thing, in this paper, you analyze the political and economic relations between Turkey and Central Asia during 28 years. And you observed this relationship, which was a very crucial and meaningful step at the early day, but it still has positive impacts. Two facts, threats reasons are: first, geopolitical relationship between Turkey-speaking states. Secondly, the development of economic relationship between Turkey and Central Asians. For example, the rate of change in trade volumes between Turkey and Central Asian countries. My questions are: first, how can the use of Turkish language affect the development of relationships between Turkey and 5 Central Asian countries? And second, according to the chart presented as you in the last pages, imports, exports, and trade volume between Turkey and the 5 Central Asian countries vary widely from country to country. Compared with 2012 and 2018, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan were cut in half. And the other two countries, Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, slowly increased. As a result, relationship with relational promotion is considered negative rather than positive, I think. Can you explain why you look positive relations between Turkey and Central Asian countries? Third, my question is very simplified. You use in your paper the expression Turkish republics when you referring to 5 Central Asian countries. In fact, this expression is very strange for me. Would you explain why you use this expression, or what this expression means for another reasons? Thank you very much.
This article is very impressive for me because the subject failed state, weak state, fragile state is not only important issue in political science, but also it is my study subject. Yeah. First of all, I would like to tell about the failed state, weak state, and fragile state. A fragile state or weak state is a failed state, and the failed state is not only a fragile state, but also a weak state. A fragile state is also a weak state capacity, or weak state legitimacy, leaving citizens vulnerable to a range of shocks. According to the political theories of Max Weber, a state is defined as maintaining a monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force within its borders. So if a state could not have a monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force, the state is a fragile state and weak state, also failed state. As you said, tribalism is an important factor to state building. But I think Sometimes tribalism is negative to nation building, not state building, nation building, in Middle East and North Africa. So I think that the state capacity and the state legitimacy is most important factors to understand the state failure. There are various key factors that can contribute to state failure. Those are poverty, corruption, unemployment, ineffective governance, high crime rate, frequent and so on. These key factors are closely related to state capacity and state legitimacy. And a number of indicators are also used to determine state failure. Those are demographic pressures, as you said about the demographic pressures. The presence of refugees and internally displaced people, group grievance, human rights, uneven development, and so on. A failed state is also a political body that has disintegrated to a point where basic conditions and the responsibilities of sovereign government no longer function properly. Even though the government is performing its functions properly, if it loses its legitimacy, the state can also fragile and fail, and so it will become failed state. I think so. The Fund for Peace and I characterizes a failed state as having the following characteristics. First, loss of control of its territory, of the monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force therein. Second, erosion of legitimate authority to make collective decisions. Third, inability to provide public services. Fourth, inability to interact with other states as a full member of the international community. Professor Saleh emphasizes the ideological threat from regional strong Iran. Iran encouraging chaos in Iraq and Yemen. And Professor Saleh insists also that the weakness of many Arab states lies in two major factors. One is natural resources and population explosion. I think that there are several weak states and failed states in Middle East and North Africa in post-Cold War era. As you know, not only Iraq, Yemen, but also Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Palestine Authority, Tunisia and Egypt, Somalia, Ethiopia for a long time. These states, weak state were weak state. So I have 3 questions here. I think without your response, no problem. First, why you argued the weakness and the failure of Iraq state and the Yemen state without or except other failed states in MENA. And I think that shortage of water and oil combined with the population explosion is just one of many factors that determine whether it is failed state or not. But as mentioned earlier, there are many factors that determine a state failure. Second question, I have another provocative question. Are the state of these countries rich in oil, including Saudi Arabia, strong state or weak state? If you think that the state of these countries are strong state, why do you think so? The third, You insist that many conflicts, especially conflicts in Iraq and Yemen, are because of ideological threat from Iran. But I think that several conflicts, disputes, and wars in Middle East is the result of identity crisis and sectarian crisis. In the Middle East, there are various identities that cross borders. In other words, there is a mixture of interrelated identities such as tribalism, Arab nationalism, Islam and Islamic sectarianism, nation-state ideology, oil rentierism, and so on. So I think that ideological threat from Iran is just one cause. Why do you think about my opinion? Thank you very much.
And thank you for the presentation of Dr. Janahan. I hope I pronounced correctly. Well, as I prepared my discussion based on his slides, so I think it was unuseful for me to prepare for my discussion. So I just want to, rather than ask questions, I just want to say things that I have interest, which is the security part, because my background is from military. Well, I know Gulf states have really big potential for the South Korea to cooperate. So right now, those are mostly on economic sector, which is oil, definitely. But I want to say that the importance and the dependency of oil import from the Gulf states might be sustained long, because it's a little, it can be a small part, but when you look at the statistics in 2018, you provided the statistics from 2017, but if you compare it, the Korean oil import from the US increased 3 times during 1 year. I think it's quite significant. There are many reasons behind that. One of them must be the price from the US shale oil and the security issue as well. Which we can think several things from that statistics. Yes, US is withdrawing from the Middle East, I agree. And, but how can I say? But our import, oil import from the US is increasing. And as we are under the strong alliance with the US, we need to think about the US fans with us, right? So the relationship between the Gulf states and Korea is really difficult and very sensitive, I would say. So the diversification of the oil trade partner would not that bad thing for the outsider's view, but for us it's really complicated issue because we are alliance with the US again. So I would suggest that we can the Gulf states and Korea can cooperate in diverse sectors other than oil or economic cooperation, like non-traditional security sectors like terrorism or trafficking, drug trade, environment issue, or climate change, such as things. So we can expand our sectors of cooperation other than strong security sectors or only oil trade things. And also, as I understand, the UAE is trying to become a role model of smart power in that region. So I think that can be a good part to cooperate with Korea and UAE as well. So, yes, thank you.
Yes, my name is Hang-Cheol Kim. First of all, thanks for presenting very useful presentation on one of the hot Chinese issues relating with the Middle Eastern regions, which are not popular studied themes in Korean researchers. For me, I have some experiences to conduct analysis relating with the BRI with the Central Asian regions. With this, this research was very useful for understanding how the Middle Eastern regions accept or react to the BRIs. As the Dr. Beck and the Dr. Lee summarized, Chinese BRI reflects the restructuring of the global powers balance, as well as the conducting many infrastructure investment projects in Asian, African, and Central Asian regions. In the geopolitical spheres, Chinese BRI has been realized by Chinese international big investment projects on global logistic infrastructure led by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, regardless of the negative public opinion of some partner countries in Western Asian countries and African countries. With this, I recommend for the further deeper progression of this research, I recommend some points to reconsider. First of all, it is needed to conduct a fact check about the U.S. foreign policies changing relating with the United States position changing in global energy market from the importers position to the exporters position. Of course, it is also considered with the shale oil issues also should be considered. Yeah, and also the next fact must be should check that by the map, by the slide, you already suggested that the map or route of the BRI in the continental side, but there is some mistakes. As far as I know, main routes are already diverged by the Chinese, Kazakhstan, Russian route and China, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran route. But I think your presentation shows not exact information about such route. So I recommend for check about this. And also for the, I have questions about the reactions or public opinions of the Middle Eastern countries. What kind of the different positioning and implementation of a Middle Eastern country with the Chinese BRI? As far as I know, in the case for the country of Iran and other countries shows the different position, different opinions. But actually, in your presentations, I cannot find any kinds of the clues for understanding such situation. So it is, and also, I also suggest for analyzing research by the land side strategy and the maritime side strategy, because by the BRI's initiative, the actual goal of the land side and the maritime side is actually different ways, different patterns. So I recommend for these factors, then it would be more useful and more deeper analysis for the current hot issues.
I read the article very clearly, so I also recommend you to read if you're very interested in relationship between US and Turkey. So discuss, it is a historical discourse starting somewhere from after the Second World War, when Turkey started actively involved into the international politics and democratization process. So Dr. Lawrence touched some points, and especially he figured out the points when the Turkey and United States had the problems during the historical development of relationship. And if we look to the last 5 or 6 years, the tensions between the two states sharply increased. There are so many phenomena and cases why the relationship of these two states getting spoiled. And another issue, maybe if you will be interested, that there is also explanation of this discourse one by one. Maybe I can propose to Dr. Lawrence to pay attention for two issues, because he did not clearly explain why the tension between the US and Turkey increased, especially recently, like last 5-6 years, because there should be reasons for this. And there are 2 points which maybe also can be pointed out into the article. The first one, that the AKP, Adalet and Inkişaf Partisi, when it came to power in 2002, their foreign policy sharply changed from the traditional status quo Turkish foreign policy. And since 2002, they has a different proactive regional policy. Turkey pretends to be a regional power, and maybe one of the reasons why the escalations and tensions happen. And another factor maybe cannot be avoided, that Trump individual factor in the relations, because we can sometimes share between the common perception of American foreign policy towards Turkey and individual perception of Trump, at least for the recent period. It is because it's not always the same. Of course, I can understand that it's a realist perception of view of the explanation of the things, but nevertheless, the Trump factor in the Turkish-American relations play a very important role. So my question is just very short and simple, is what's your, you explained that there are 3 possible scenarios about the development of relationship that I just only wanted to concretize. How do you see US-Turkish relations in post-Erdogan period? Do you think that Erdogan is a factor in tension between the two states? And if Erdogan and AKP party will change one day, don't you think that Turkey will come back to the traditional status quo policy in the region and everything will become to own places? Thank you very much.
Okay. So as far as the last 5 or 6 years, I would say that the arming of the Kurds in 2014, 2015 in northern Syria was the pivotal moment where things changed. The Trump factor is too big. I'm not going to try to do that in a minute and 30 seconds. He's an interesting guy. His transactional approach to international affairs is not just something that's bringing trouble in Turkey, but here as well. And I'll let somebody else tackle that one. As far as post-Erdogan relations, that's really interesting. And I'm just going to think of this off the top of my head. First off, that's an assumption. I'm not sure what post-Erdogan Turkey is really going to look like. Institutions of the state have changed so much, especially after the coup, that frankly his legacy might live on for a generation or two. It really depends on how this happens. How would he come from power? Would the AKP stay in power? Would he have some sort of hand-picked individual to come next? Or will he figure out a way to manipulate things to stay in power until he leaves the earth? Which frankly wouldn't surprise me necessarily either. So he has a very vested interest in staying in power, whether that be his predecessor that he wants in power or him staying there forever, because there's a very vitriolic 49 or 48% that do not like him, who would, I think, do their best to put him in prison. He would have an existential threat if he weren't in power. So the post-Erdogan Turkey, depending on who took charge, if that were his predecessor handpicked, I think you would see somewhat of a continuation. If you had the CHP come in, the traditional Republican Party, I guess is what you would call them, you would probably have a little bit more NATO-centric or more Western-leaning group that would come back in. Should there be a bigger rise in the EE party, the Good Party, or the MHP party, then you would see a continuation of nationalistic policies. Done.
Excellent. I'm gonna hover over the microphone. So
Okay,
exit your 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll just finish it in 2 minutes. Thank you for your comments, Dr. Kim. And yeah, I just want to quick answer 2 questions that you just asked us. So first one is, yeah, Kazakhstan and the Eurasian is very important in the BRI project. But the main focus that we are now, and the map that we use was like kind of the map that kind of focuses on the Middle Eastern area, because that was our title. And here you kind of ask us about like the details of what each countries are kind of like building through, especially like Middle Eastern country, based on BRI, like the what we call networks. So like, but yeah, I mean the needs of the BRI and the mutual prosperity is getting bigger. For example, in 2005 in UAE itself, there was only 18 Chinese companies were kind of like make a foothold in the UAE, but now it's like what 200 more. I mean, like sorry, it's like it's almost 400, and it's now like most of the products that it is imported from the China to the UAE is re-exported. So 80% are re-exported to Africa. So it's like kind of creating the what do we call mutual prosperity. And lastly, the Neom cities and all this like Masdar city, all the new fourth generation cities are kind of trying to build based on the platform of Huawei and those kind of like the Chinese technology. That's why the United States started to criticize Huawei and started to make a sanction on it. So we could go on and on and on, but like we kind of like take it out most part of it because we have to finish it in 15 minutes. So, but thank you for your comments. We're gonna make put it into our like paper, so we're going to make much better for the future. So thank you very much.
I agree with you on the traditional versus non-traditional security aspects. I think cooperation is always easier in the non-traditional security dynamics. Soft security is certainly easy, right? And they've already been working on that. But I think it also has limited shelf life. At some point, you'll have to graduate towards hard security. And I don't really foresee any crisis in South Korea Gulf relations in the near future. But as you mentioned, the US, which was a common security guarantor both for South Korea and the Gulf countries, is soon becoming an energy competitor. Which could create some sort of unpleasantness in the years ahead between the Gulf countries and South Korea. Again, this has nothing to do with the security scenario in the region. The US's political influence has been declining for the last 2 decades, and now we're beginning to see how there's a bit of questionability about its military deterrence as well, especially after the attacks on Aramco facilities this year. So as we move on, I think China is going to become a major factor in the region. South Korea needs to be proactive. It needs to decide whether it wants to be part of the US-led Quad, which also has Japan, with which you don't have very good relations. But also, it works against China. So which way do you want it to be? Do you want it to be US-led Quad, or do you want to actually start taking steps towards trying to take care of your own interest and being part of a collective security architecture? Thank you.
Those are really interesting observations there, yeah. Absolutely. Saleh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jung. I appreciate your comments. You have 3 main comments, I guess. One is about the definition between weak states and failing states. I think your point is very valid. However, to go into definitions, you'd have to go on a book form, and I was just writing an article, a paper, a research paper. Secondly, you mentioned a very important point that the failure of states is due to 2 factors, as you said: state capacity and state legitimacy. Very important. I think that the Arab Spring, the first Arab Spring, was fought on state legitimacy, on the issue of state legitimacy. This spring, whether in Iran or in Iraq or Lebanon, is fought on state capacity. So there is a difference now. It's people no longer think about identity and ideology. They think about the capacity of the state to deliver goods and services, whether in Iran, Iraq, in Lebanon, or elsewhere, okay? Thirdly, you suggest that where is the Gulf states are going to go? Are they powerful states or weak states or failing states? I think the Gulf states are moving from a welfare state model into a more of an extractive state model based on taxation and so on. And the more successful they can move from the welfare state model to an extractive state model, this is going to answer your question. How successful they can move is very important. It has also to do with the pace of applying taxation to the population who has not in the past used to pay taxes, suddenly have to pay tax. How fast they can move. This is very important. So this will dictate the success or failure of the Gulf states in the future. Thank you.
Fascinating response.
Why do I call them Central Asian Turkic republics, right? It's in terminology, when we say Turkish, we mean Turkish people and Turkish language living in Turkey. But when we say Turkic, it means origin of Turkey. That's, for example, Central Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and in Caucasus, Azerbaijan and North Cyprus, Turkish Republic. We call them Turkic world. Of course, they are independent republics, but also there are some autonomous, which I don't touch now. But when we say it's a huge umbrella, those people who are speaking Turkic languages, same origin, same cultural ties, same historical ties. So, for example, recently, Turkic Council, for example, this is an organization which includes these republics. Recently, in October 14-15, there was 7th summit of Turkic Council, which was held in Baku. And, for example, first president of Kazakhstan, Nazarbayev, had this kind of suggestion: why do we call this Council of Turkic-speaking countries? We should rename it as Turkic Council, Council of Turkic States. So there was an emphasis to the languages, but here it means the same root, same Turkicness, ethnic identity also. Second question about Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan's. Well, if you remember, there was chart in the years between 2001 and 11. There was usually a very increase, right? Rise 10 times, 15 times. But Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan, their mutual trade rate was very low at that time. But in recent 6 years, it's increasing. The first question about usage of language, right? Usage of language, you mean usage of Turkish language or their, language, native languages?
You can't answer that.
Okay, we can discuss in coffee time, maybe.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
thank you for your attention.